1.7 million words. That's roughly how many a young person used to speak out loud in a year of casual face to face conversation. Today, a huge chunk of those words are never said at all. They're typed, swiped, double tapped, or simply swallowed in silence. And the research backing this up is starting to look less like a cultural complaint and more like a quiet emergency. The Association for Psychological Science recently pointed to something striking buried inside the American Time Use Survey. Between 2003 and 2024, researchers tracked how 15 to 25-year-olds actually spent their hours. Not how they said they spent them, how they actually did. And the number that fell off a cliff was in-person socializing. In 2003, the average young American spent about 60 minutes a day physically around other people in a social way. By 2024, that number had dropped to 36 minutes. 36 minutes. That's less than the length of a single sitcom episode. That's shorter than most commutes. That's the time it takes to microwave dinner and scroll through a feed. 24 minutes a day might not sound like much on paper, but stretch it across a year, and you're looking at almost 150 hours of lost human contact. Stretch it across a decade, and it's the equivalent of erasing entire seasons of someone's social life. And the survey suggests this isn't an isolated dip. It's a parallel trend, showing up across other age groups too, just not as steeply. The headline number, the one that gives this story its name, is 1.7 million unspoken words. That figure is meant to capture what gets lost when those minutes disappear, because a minute of in-person conversation isn't just a minute. It's tone, it's eye contact. It's the half sentence you start, abandon, and replace with a better one because you saw the other person's face react. None of that translates cleanly to a screen. A text message is efficient. It is not rich. A voice note is warmer. It is still not the same as sitting across from someone and watching them think. The American Time Use Survey doesn't measure warmth, but it measures the container that warmth used to live in, and that container is shrinking fast. Now here's where the psychology gets interesting, because the obvious explanation is the phone, and the phone is part of it. But the phone has been around in some form for almost the entire window the survey covers. Smartphones didn't appear in 2003 and then vanish in 2024. They got better, they got stickier. But the slide in face-to-face time has been steady, not sudden. That suggests the cause isn't just the device, it's what the device replaced. And what it replaced wasn't loneliness, it was friction. The small, slightly annoying, slightly awkward effort of showing up. Driving across town, waiting at a coffee shop, sitting through a lull in conversation without reaching for an exit. All of that has a cost, and for 2 decades, we've been quietly opting out of paying it. The trouble is that friction was doing something. Psychologists have long argued that the mild discomfort of in-person interaction is precisely what builds social muscle. You learn to read a room because you've been in rooms. You learn to handle a pause because you've sat through pauses. You learn that most awkward moments don't end you. You learn it by living through them. Strip those reps away, and the muscle atrophies, not catastrophically, just enough that the next interaction feels harder than the last, which makes you slightly less likely to seek out the one after that. The American Time Use Survey can't measure this loop directly, but the loop is the most plausible explanation for why the slide keeps going, year after year, even when people say they want more connection, because they do say it. Survey after survey shows young adults reporting higher loneliness than older generations, higher anxiety about social situations, higher rates of canceling plans they actually wanted to keep. The desire is there. The behavior isn't catching up. And the gap between the two is where a lot of modern unhappiness seems to live. Think about what 24 fewer minutes a day actually changes. It changes the texture of a friendship. Friendships used to be maintained by accident. You'd bump into someone, you'd linger after class, you'd sit on a porch because there was nowhere else to be. Now, every interaction has to be scheduled, and scheduling has overhead. So the marginal hangout, the one that wasn't quite worth a calendar invite, just doesn't happen. The 1.7 million words estimate is a way of making that invisible loss feel solid. It's not really about the literal word count, it's about the density of a life. A life with more spoken words in it is a life with more witnesses, more small confessions, more inside jokes that don't survive in a group chat, more moments where someone hears you change your mind in real time. And here's a detail worth sitting with. The survey didn't find that young people are doing nothing instead. They're doing plenty. They're working. They're studying, they're consuming staggering amounts of media, they're communicating constantly through screens. The hours haven't vanished, they've migrated out of physical rooms and into digital ones. And digital rooms, for all their convenience, don't seem to feed the same part of the brain. Neuroscientists have a name for what in-person contact provides that screens struggle to replicate. Co-regulation. It's the quiet, unconscious process where two nervous systems sync up when they're in the same space. Your heart rate adjusts to theirs. Your breathing settles. The stress hormones in your blood drop just from being near someone who feels safe. None of that happens through a glass rectangle. The signal is too thin. So when in-person time falls from 60 minutes to 36, what's falling isn't just conversation. It's a kind of biological regulation that humans have relied on for hundreds of thousands of years. We are, at the chemical level, animals who calm down around other animals like us. Take that away, and the baseline anxiety of being alive ticks up. Quietly, constantly. That might be the real story hiding inside the survey. Not that young people are antisocial, not that they don't care about each other. They care intensely, but the architecture of their days no longer routes them into the kind of contact that does the calming. They have to seek it out deliberately. And deliberate seeking is a much weaker force than accidental routine. This is where the psychological angle gets sharp. Because humans are famously bad at allocating effort toward things that pay off slowly. We will spend an hour on a screen that gives us a small dopamine hit every 30 seconds. We will not spend an hour on a coffee that pays off in a friendship we'll appreciate in 5 years. The math is the same, the wiring is not. So the slide from 60 minutes to 36 isn't a moral failure. It's the predictable outcome of giving humans easier, faster, lower friction alternatives to something that was always a little inconvenient. The wonder isn't that face-to-face time fell. The wonder is that any of it survived at all, but it did survive. 36 minutes a day is not zero. It's the floor that human beings, even saturated in technology, even given every excuse to stay home, still seem to need. There appears to be a minimum below which something in us refuses to drop. Whether that floor holds, or whether the next 20 years grind it down further, is one of the open questions sitting underneath this research. There's also the question of what 36 minutes actually contains, because not all socializing is equal. Eating dinner with family counts. So does standing in line with a coworker. So does a 15-minute conversation with a stranger at a bus stop. The survey lumps these together, but anyone who has lived through a lonely week knows that some kinds of contact nourish and others just pass the time. The raw minute count probably overstates how much real connection is happening inside the shrinking window, which means the 1.7 million unspoken words figure might actually be conservative. The words that are missing aren't just the casual ones. They're the ones that only get said when two people have been in a room long enough to drop their guard. Those words don't appear in the first 10 minutes. They appear in the 40th. And the 40th minute, increasingly, never arrives. What does this all add up to? Not a panic, not a lecture about putting phones down. The data is more interesting than that. It suggests that something foundational about how humans maintain themselves emotionally has been quietly restructured in the space of one generation. The 15-year-old in 2003 lived in a different social ecosystem than the 15-year-old in 2024. Same species, same needs, different daily diet, and the long-term consequences of that dietary change are still being measured. Mental health statistics for young adults have moved in the wrong direction over the same period the in-person minutes have fallen. Correlation is not causation, but the two curves look suspiciously like siblings. Researchers will spend the next decade arguing about which is the cause and which is the symptom. The honest answer is probably that they feed each other. There's a kind of dark elegance to the trap. The lonelier you feel, the harder it is to initiate contact. The harder it is to initiate contact, the more you retreat to the screen. The more you retreat to the screen, the less practice you get at the thing that would actually help. And every day, the survey's averages tick another fraction of a minute downward. But traps have edges, and edges can be found. The same research that maps the decline also points to what works in reverse. Brief, repeated, low-stakes contact. The barista you see 3 times a week. The neighbor whose name you actually learn. The friend you text not to plan something elaborate, but just to sit on the couch for an hour. Small reps, cheap reps, the kind that rebuild the muscle without requiring a personality transplant. That's the quiet hope inside this otherwise grim number. 36 minutes a day is low. It is not irreversible. The human nervous system that needed 60 minutes in 2003 is still the same nervous system in 2024. It hasn't evolved out of the need. It's just been starved of the supply. Supply can return. Habits can rebuild. Words can be spoken. 1.7 million of them, in fact, are waiting. They're the sentences that would have been said if someone had stayed 20 minutes longer. The questions that would have been asked if the room hadn't emptied so fast. The small admissions that only come out when no one is recording. They're not gone. They're just unspoken. And the difference between those two words might be the most important thing this research has to teach us. So the next time a conversation runs long, and you feel the pull to leave, consider staying. Not for the other person, for the version of yourself that only shows up in the 40th minute. That's the one the survey is quietly asking us not to lose.